Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr Howarth. I very much support the amendments that are designed to increase parliamentary scrutiny. I've signed many of them, and I very much support those amendments that are about giving the right to EU nationals now to remain. This is a moral issue, not some kind of transactional calculation, and that should be guaranteed now. But, Mr Howarth, I rise to raise an issue that has not yet been discussed, and it's in my new clause 36. It's the issue of transitional arrangements. Now, I welcome the White Paper's recognition that if a deal can be successfully secured within the 2-year period once Article 50 is triggered, then we won't leave the EU literally overnight. There'll be a phased implementation to give business in particular the chance to adapt. But that is not the same thing as needing a period of transition should 2 years not provide sufficient to reach an agreement. And to have no idea of what that agreement is going to be is a glaring omission. That is what my amendment seeks to address, a transitional arrangement to govern UK-EU trade relations during the period, if necessary, between when the UK leaves the EU and when a longer-term agreement is concluded. Because currently, when we hit the 2-year mark, which in reality is more like 18 months, given the requirement to bring the deal before MPs, the European Parliament and so on, given that very short amount of time, the only option if a deal has not been secured is essentially to send Britain over a cliff edge. We'd face having to leave the EU effectively overnight, crashing out on WTO-only terms. Now, the government has stated very clearly in its white paper that it wants to avoid cliff edges, but at the moment it's done nothing to try to stay away from this one. Perhaps it's been too busy looking the other way over the Atlantic and it simply hasn't noticed it. But my amendment is a safety net. Now, given that both France and Germany are going to be preoccupied with national elections for much of this year, coupled with the limited negotiating capacity and relative inexperience of the UK team, it seems very likely that 2 years will not be sufficient time to get the best deal for Britain. So if we come to the end of the 2-year period, we need a plan that isn't just the default option of the Wild West that is the WTO. Now, the Prime Minister says that she has unanimous agreement with the other 27 member states, that getting that unanimous agreement is an option. Well, we need to know that that's being specifically discussed, that option of continuing the negotiations. And we need to know that before we secure before we trigger Article 50. Otherwise, we risk yet more uncertainty for our economy, for the citizens living in the EU, and for all of our constituents. It's very much, Mr Howarth, like jumping out of a plane to escape someone you've fallen out with and failing to double-check that there's a parachute in the pack that they have strapped on your back. Now, what possible reason would anyone have for being so complacent or foolhardy? Exiting the EU is really about 2 separate processes. No, I won't, because there isn't time. And many in the EU want us to conclude the divorce element, which comes with a potential bill of €60 billion, before discussing a trade deal. We must not forget that this is a negotiation. Article 50 only covers administrative Brexit, not the legal or trade aspects. So if, after 2 years, we don't yet even have a basic divorce deal, it's possible there'll be frayed tempers, dwindling patience, and in such circumstances, the prospect of starting negotiations on trade deals is rather unlikely, to put it mildly. The 27 other countries will likely want to get agreement on the divorce settlement agreed via the courts, so trade negotiations may not even be possible, even if the political will is there. So for all of those reasons, Mr Howarth, we absolutely need to have this transition arrangement in place. I didn't give way because I want to give space for my colleagues behind us, but let me just reiterate how frustrating it is that of a debate of this importance, we're having to rattle through it at this ridiculous rate.